Christ our Savior. Amen. I have a very bad habit in my life that I often do really good at starting projects but not finishing projects. Does anyone else have this problem? Melissa, you're like, yeah, okay, you kind of have that yeah. It's one of those that I really love starting it because I'm really excited, it's new, it's great. I'm also really good at like the big stuff. Like what I'll often do is get about 90% of the project done. And then once I get about that much done, my mind starts thinking, well, what's the next project that I've got to get onto? What's the next thing? And also, especially after you've expended that much energy, what I'm really looking forward to most of all is just a little rest. In our household, it happens quite frequently when we have house projects that we get through about 90% of the house project, and then Heather and I immediately... Now, Heather and I do two different things. I usually tend to say, hey, let's bask in the glory that is this new project that we just completed. And Heather's like, let's move on to the next project and get going. And so we never really get a chance to finish it. I love it when we do actually finish. There are times that I feel really accomplished when the task is ultimately done. Now, the problem is we're never really done, are we? If you own your own home, you always know one of the jokes is there's always something more to be done. I'm always amazed at the Golden Gate Bridge. If you know anything about the Golden Gate Bridge, they paint it. They start on one end, and I don't ever want to be that person that paints it, but they start on one end, and they go through and they paint the whole bridge, and guess what they do when they get to the end? They start over again because by then it's been, I don't know how long it takes them to paint it, but it needs it again. You're never really done. I often wondered how excited I was when I finally finished my seminary education. Because, you started preschool, kindergarten, 1st through 12th grade. Then you have to go to college. And then everyone's graduated from college, but I'm like crying because my education isn't done yet. I still have to go to seminary. And let me tell you, when I graduated from seminary, I was so excited. No longer do I have to read any more books. No longer do I have to prepare for stuff on a weekly basis. And then, of course, I become a pastor. And it is a very odd feeling when Sunday hits and I get to preach. And I have this wonderful message to give to you that God has given to me. And at the end of it, I really don't have any time to bask in the glory of the most eloquent words ever spoken. I have to immediately do what? I'm starting to think of the next sermon that I've got to speak. I'm never done. Even when I've had guest preachers. When I've had guest preachers and I could say, hey, this is great for this coming week, I don't have to prepare a sermon. I'm still really busy, but in the back of my mind, I'm still already thinking, what's the next thing I'm supposed to do? Let's face it, you're never really done, are you? You're also never done with regards to your faith. A lot of times people think that rites of the church are treated as some sort of graduation ceremony. We're excited coming up on September 13th. Our plan is that we're going to celebrate confirmation from what was supposed to happen last year or the year. They're all blurring together now. And confirmation is a time of instruction where we give extra information, extra stuff about the church, its doctrines, its belief, and then how to apply that to your life. We give that to especially teenagers around 7th and 8th grade, but sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. And sometimes at the end of it, people go, great, I'm done. Well, no, you're not done with who here stopped growing in their faith when they were confirmed or maybe even graduated high school. Some people graduate from religious institutions, whether it be like Lutheran High School or Concordia University Irvine. Some people say, yay, I'm done. No, you're never, ever done. I know that sometimes it feels challenging to look forward into the future and say, how much longer do I have to go? I think this is why it's super important, especially when it comes to our faith development, that we don't look upon things as a sprint race, that we try to cram as much as we can, as fast as we can. Truly, life and spiritual life is a marathon. It is something that will continue on until we draw our last breath. This is, I think, very important for those who are entering into older years, like myself. I'm feeling the pain of life a little bit more. And I have to remember, as long as God is giving me breath in my lungs, there's work to be done. So I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. There is still work to be done. That's what we learn from Joshua chapters 13 through 19. Let me give us a running start into it. Remember, they've had problems. They were coming into the promised land. They had some false starts, but they finally got the go-ahead after all of those years, Genesis through Deuteronomy. Now they step into the promised land. They have a great victory at Jericho. They have a terrible defeat at Ai. Then they have a great victory at Ai. And then they have all of these encounters with different groups that ultimately, some are resisting the grace and goodness of God, and some of them are actually coming into the fold, and they are now going around with these different campaigns to finally take over the land that God had promised to them. And if you remember, it's at the end of Joshua 11, it said, then the land had rest from war. The idea now is they've done the conquering. They now have the land subdued, kinda, and now they finally get a chance to divvy up the land. But there's still some stuff to be said. Joshua chapter 13, I'm going to read these first 5 verses, first 7 verses. I just think these first 2 verses are hilarious. When Joshua was old and well advanced in years, the Lord said to him, you are old and well advanced in you. Thank you, God. I really appreciate that, pointing out to me that I'm old and advanced in years. There are still very large areas of land to be taken over. They had taken over a lot of it, but they hadn't taken over all of it yet. It was still kind of done. Essentially, God is telling them there's still work to be done. And he says, this is the land that remains, all the regions of the Philistines and Geshurites, from the Shihor River on the east of Egypt to the territory of Ekron on the north. All of it is counted as Canaanite, the territory of the 5 Philistine rulers in Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron, that of the Avrites. From the south, all the land of the Canaanites, from the Era and the Sidonians as far as Aphek, the region of the Amorites, the area of the Jebusites, and all Lebanon to the east, from Baal-Gad below Mount Hermon to Lebo-Hamath. Well, that sounds like a lot of land. There still is a lot of land to be done. As for all the inhabitants of the mountain regions from Lebanon to Mizraphoth, Maim, that is all the Sidonians, I myself will drive them out before the Israelites, which I think is kind of nice of God. Here's all the areas that need to be taken, and so you need to go take care of this. But you know what? I'll go ahead and take one area. I'll handle that for you on your behalf. Yeah, because he's old. This is, and again, how old is Moses? I'm sorry, Joshua. Sorry, how old is Joshua? Moses is dead. Did I say Moses at the beginning? I did, yes. Moses is dead. This is Joshua. Joshua is very old and advanced in years. We think that Joshua is probably somewhere around 85-ish. The only reason why I say that is he had a really close friend that was part of the conquering, or part of the spying out of the land. Do you remember his name? Joshua and Caleb. Yeah, he comes in to factor in just a moment. Caleb's going to talk a little bit about this. So all of this still needs to be done, but I'll still help you out. And it says, be sure to allocate this land to Israel for an inheritance as I've instructed you, and divide it as an inheritance among the 9 tribes and half of the tribe of Manasseh. Why only 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh? The others on the east side. So if you remember, before they came into the land, there were 2 tribes, 2.5 tribes that said, we like the land east. And God said, okay, fine. If that's what you want, you can have that. But you have to send your fighting men over and then help conquer the land. And then you can return back to the land. And so that's why this next section is essentially a flashback where it starts with the division of the land east of the Jordan. So skip down to verse 13. He's talking about the land east of the Jordan, about the other tribes. And it said, but the Israelites did not drive out the people of Geshur and Makkah, so they continued to live among the Israelites to this day. So this is proof that there were still land to be taken. And then he gives stuff to Reuben, and then skip down to verse 32 of chapter 13. This is the inheritance Moses had given when he was in the plains of Moab across the Jordan east of Jericho. But to the tribe of Levi, Moses had given no inheritance. The Lord, the God of Israel, is their inheritance as he promised. So for those of you that love ticky-tacky details, which I'm one of those really weird biblical nerds, how many tribes of Israel are there? 12. 12 is the magic number. It shows up all over the place. The problem is the tribe of Levi, which was mainly the priests. God says, you guys don't get any land. Well, that doesn't seem fair. They get cities, and we're going to talk about that next week. They get special cities throughout it. Well, the problem is, how are we still so are we dividing the land into 12 still, or is it now 11 since we take Levi out? This is how they often calculated things. They're still going to do a calculation of 12. What they do is when you count the tribe of Levi, you take Ephraim and Manasseh, join them together into one tribe called the tribe of Joseph. So if you ever see the tribe of Joseph, that's actually 2 tribes in one. Levi is going to be taken out, so now Ephraim and Manasseh get to be counted as their own thing. And then chapter 14, division of the land west of the Jordan. And it goes through this really long thing about how to divide the land. I've got a map for you. Joshua, if you could help me out, this next slide is a map. A little hard to read for you guys in the back, but it kind of helps you see a little bit of the territory that's there. You see Manasseh has got this massive amount. Half of the tribe is staying on the east side, and half is on the west side. You see Gad and Reuben, they're on the right, the east side. So that's the 2.5 tribes. And then you've got Asher and Naphtali to the north. You got Zebulun and Issachar, smaller things. You got Manasseh. Then you go Ephraim and Dan. Then you got Benjamin, Judah, and I'm sorry, Simeon got cut off a little bit. But Simeon is essentially located all within the realm of Judah. But if you look on the far left, you see the land that says Philistia. So that's where the Philistines live. That's part of the area that hasn't been conquered. And then on the lower right, you have Moab, and these are some of the areas that have not been taken over. God is trying to tell them, you're not done yet. There's still more to be conquered. All right, Joshua, you can go to the next slide. And we'll go back to that. So now we have this division of the land west of the Jordan. So now we have the areas of the 9.5 tribes. Now, verse 6, we're going to come back to this because it's the discussion with Caleb. And Caleb is going to be lifted up as an example of how we continue our lives, an example of what it means to say we are not done. So, chapter 15, you see the allotment for Judah. And again, if you want to skim through the stuff, it's saying things like, well, here's the towns, that are in your boundaries. Here's your northern boundary, southern boundary, western boundary, eastern boundary. And so you could read through it and you're like, oh my gosh. And so people smarter than me have come up with those maps saying, here's kind of how it's getting divided. Judah is in prominence. It's the first to inherit. It's the last to fall. If you remember, there's an issue later on when there's a civil war. The tribes of the north and go against the tribes of the south, and the southern area is called Judah, and the northern area is just called Israel, or Joseph. And so Judah gets this huge swath of land, and they get some prominence within this whole thing. And as you can see, they get all the boundaries that are there. Skip forward to verse 63 of chapter 15. Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem, and to this day the Jebusites lived there with the people of Judah. So this is prior to the time when finally Jerusalem falls and it becomes the capital of the capital of the entire land of Israel, but specifically the southern kingdom. And then chapter 17, they're going to give an allotment for the tribe of Manasseh. There's this cool little story, if you ever want to read it, in chapter 17 from verse 3 and following. There was some arguments about women's rights. It's really an interesting story. It goes back to the book of Numbers when these girls, Zelophehad's daughters, say, hey, our father Zelophehad passed away. We have no male living relative, and how can we pass the land on? Can we as women hold the land? Now, back in that day, the patriarchal society was super strong. Everything went through the men. But God said, no, it is very good, it is very right for these women to hold their land. So, I mean, even from very early on, we're only at the 6th book of the Bible, God is showing how there's going to be some barriers that are going to be broken down as life goes on, and as Jesus does this later on, and then Paul saying stuff like, there's no male or female, Jew or Gentile, you are all one, you are all equal in the sight of God. It's quite an amazing thing. So Zelophehad's daughters finally come and receive the inheritance that's given to them. Now, verse 12. Of chapter 17. Yet the Manassites were not able to occupy these towns, for the Canaanites were determined to live in the region. However, when the Israelites grew stronger, they subjected the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. So you're starting to see this refrain. Everywhere you go, there are certain lands that are not being conquered, and God is trying to say, you're not done. There's still work that has to be completed. Are you starting to see how this starts applying to your life? Start thinking about that, especially in the concept of, I am a Christian, I have been forgiven of all of my sins, but there are certain sins and certain things that I have not expelled from my life, and those things are causing problems to me to this day. This is the reason why when we first started talking about Joshua coming in the land and God said, you've got to take out all these people, at first it sounds kind of negative, but now you start to see the reason why. There are going to be peoples that worship gods that are going to be problematic from here on out. In fact, the book of Judges is all about how those people who were not dislodged, those things that were pulling the people away from God, continued to gain strength until finally they overtook the Israelite nation, and they ended up in this cycle of sin. And that's the reason why when God says, it's time for you to expel stuff in your life, you need to get it gone. He goes so far to say, if your right hand causes you to sin, chop it off. Of course, the problem is with me, is if I chop off my right hand, I'm pretty certain that my left hand's going to start sinning. And if my right eye causes me to sin, and I don't know how that actually works, why is it just my right and not my left? It's essentially both. Pluck them out. It would be better to enter in the kingdom of God maimed than it would be to be tossed completely into hell. This is the seriousness of sin. This is why there's work that's always got to be done. There's always things in our life that still need to be addressed. I remember for years I would listen to Billy Graham, who is, I guess, known as America's pastor, had amazing crusades and talked a lot about faith in Jesus Christ and leading people into that faith. Billy Graham was a very humble guy, but he was also keenly aware of sin. And it always bugged me, some of the things that he did. One of his biggest habits that he had was if he was staying in a city that was not his own, he was staying in a hotel, if he was going up to his room and a female entered into the elevator, Billy Graham would step off the elevator. Because he says, I'm constantly battling lust. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, doesn't it get easier? Like, I'm hoping that all of the challenges that I had as a youngster with all of raging hormones and all of the problems associated with sexual sins, I always hope, like, well, as we get older, it gets easier, right? No, it doesn't get any easier. In fact, it gets worse. Now I can understand Billy, who's saying, I'm not even going to take any chances. For him, he was chopping it off. I will not engage in that in any way, shape, or form. I won't even allow a temptation to get near me. That's pretty big. Him saying, I need that out. I need that gone. He kept saying, I'm never done. I think of people like Billy Graham or people like Paul the Apostle. You think, Paul, he's a pretty good guy. You would say he has his stuff together. He follows God pretty well. He knows all of God's law quite nicely from the Old Testament, but he also knows how to apply that in a New Testament way, and he knows how to live his life. And yet, what does Paul say later on? He says, who is going to rescue me from this body of death? He's like, all the good things that I know I should be doing, I don't do them. And all of the bad things that I know I'm not supposed to be doing, I keep doing those. And I'm thinking to myself, but wait, you're Paul. Like, if you struggle with this, what chance is there for any of us? There's always work to be done. We are grateful and thankful for all that God has done for us. He has forgiven us. He has loved us. And that is never anything that we should ever take for granted. But as we all know, life doesn't stop there, does it? Coming to faith doesn't make the journey end. In fact, it just starts. And God promised, you are going to be in a battle for the rest of your life. Isn't that great news? I'm so excited that the fight is not over. And it doesn't matter what age you hit, you will always be in this battle. There is still more to be done. All right, we got to keep going. Where am I at? Sheesh. 17. Oh, I just finished 17. And then in 18, we have more allotments. They have this huge thing. Joseph comes and they start whining. And they're like, we've got a lot of people, so we deserve a bigger portion of land. Go backwards, Joshua. Did you see the portion of land with Manasseh and Ephraim? Would you say that's a big portion of land? And they come to Joshua and they're like, we need more land. So do you know what Joshua says? Well, if you want more land, go and take more land from the surrounding nations that you haven't dislodged yet. And they're like, but that's not good enough. That's not fair. And like, yeah, it's totally fair. You want more, take more. But they're like, but it's too hard. Yes, you are not done. Your life is not finished just because you come to faith. All right, you can go forward again. It's just a really funny story if you want to read it at some point. And let me tell you, I wrote this in my Bible. If you want more ministry, do you know that God will always give it to you? If you're sitting around going, God, I want to do more for your kingdom. Do you know what he will never say? He will never say no. He'll look at you and say, finally, what do you want? It's wide open. There's plenty of things to be done. Do you want more ministry? There is a lot that needs to be done. There are people who have not yet come to faith. There are people who not know about Jesus. There's still ministry that needs to be done for kids. We still need preschool teachers. Chris is dying. She gets calls every week. Yeah, I'd like to enroll my kid. She's like, sure. We don't have teachers, but God's going to provide somehow. There's more work that can be done. We always are in need of people. We need people to help run Pro Presenter, people running video stuff, people doing kids' church, people making communion. But we have so many jobs available, we are never at a shortage. So if you're sitting there going, gosh, what can I do? There's a lot that can be done. Again, please, I subscribe to the idea, please don't come up to me and say, I think Searchlight needs to do ministry to teenage girls who have kids. Because you know what I'm going to say to you? Fantastic. I'm glad you're volunteering for this. Because if you think that that's a ministry we need, then do it. By the way, I love to get out of the way. I hate managing stuff. I am not a micromanager. If you come to me and say, I think we need to do this, fabulous. I'm going to say, do it. I loved it when years ago Ray said, I think we need to do something for the men on Wednesday nights. I'm going to lead something. I'm like, fantastic. Like, it's done. I'm out of the way. Do it. What can I do to help you? If you have ideas for many, because guess what? You're not done. You've come to faith. You believe in Jesus. That's fantastic. That's good. You are now saved. You have been given freedom from sin, death, the power, and the devil. And now you have freedom to serve God and others. How are you going to do it? Some of you are taking a rest. And I get it. I need to take my rest sometimes. But it doesn't mean we're done. There's much more that can be done. All right, then chapter 18, we get the division of the rest of the land. And as you go through this stuff, it's like, oh my goodness gracious, there's all these different things. You've got allotment for Benjamin, and then chapter 19, you got the allotment for Simeon, and then you got the allotment for Zebulun, and Issachar, and Asher, and Naphtali, and Dan. And then look at verse 47 of chapter 19. By the way, aren't you amazed? We're in chapter 19. This is a miracle. Miracles never cease. Verse 47, but the Danites had difficulty taking possession of their territory, so they went up and attacked Leshem, took it, put it to the sword, and occupied it. They settled in Leshem and named it Dan after their forefathers. And then, verse 49, there's an allotment for Joshua. Joshua is told, you get some land as well. You're going to receive this, and it'll be wonderful. So now, flip backwards, because I want to end with Caleb. And that's chapter 14, starting verse 6. So this is what I'm going to read, and I think this is really, really, really amazing stuff. I think we need more Calebs. That's what we need. I love what he does. Verse 6, now the men of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. So he's like, let's reminisce a little bit. Let's remember this wonderful stuff. Verse 7, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land, and I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my brothers went up with me and made the hearts of the people melt with fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to put on your tombstone? Now, did Caleb sin? Oh, yeah. But you know what made Caleb follow the Lord, his God, so wholeheartedly is that he never stopped. He always knew there was more to be done and that he was never going to give up doing what God has asked him. Verse 9, so on the day that Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said to Moses while Israel moved about in the desert. So here I am today, 85 years old. Okay. Robert, how old are you? 83. Is there anyone? He's 82? He'll be 83 in August. Okay, yeah, well, that's close enough. Come on, he's 82 years old. Let the poor guy have it. Okay, there's no one old. Mike, you're nowhere close to that. Mike, where are you at? 75 this year. Is there anyone up in the 80s beyond? George, how old are you? Oh, I'm Marge. Marge, how old are you? You're 85. So this is you, 85. You are like Caleb. You are the same age as Caleb. Oh, my goodness. George, how old are you?
Still in my 70s.
Still in the 70s. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Pam, you're still 70s? I hate 75? Okay, good. Okay. I know that, but I am in awe of anyone who gets to this age. 85 years old? Okay, so Marge, this sermon is for you. All right? Because, and Robert, you better listen because, Brenda, how old are you? 75. Okay, so a lot of you still got another 10 years before you get to the age of Caleb. Yes?
When you start putting out ages, you're really treading on water.
I know, I'm treading on very thin ice, and this is a very dangerous thing. So I try not to ask people's ages, because, I get into trouble, but...
We just want to look at you. Well, how old are you?
How old are you? How old am I? I'm 48. I'm 48.
So you're only halfway there.
I'm only halfway there, which means... Now, this is important because if you are under the age of 85, should you have excitement and joy in what you have? Should you have more or less energy than an 85-year-old? You should have more, or at least the same. I mean, Marge is she's going full bore. She's still doing stuff. Oh, it's no joke. It's amazing when Mark. Okay, so 85 years old, verse 11. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now that's impressive. You gotta understand that we're not, obviously for Caleb, we're talking about a physical battle. I don't know who here at age 85 would join the armed forces. But we're talking about spiritually here. When you are 85, it's good to say, I am just as strong spiritually now as I was 40 years ago. Dare I say, some of the strongest Christians I know are either brand new Christians, because they're on fire and just doing amazing stuff, or those who've been around for a very long time. And no, there's still work to be done. There's still work to be done. We're not done yet. Marge, you are not done yet. Isn't that fantastic? There's still more to be done. Robert, there's still more to be done. When you think of that, so that means for us who are younger, I think we better start stepping it up a little bit, don't you think? Because it's incredible to listen about the joy and the excitement. And if you've ever listened to Marge talk about the joy she has, especially when it comes to things in music, it's pretty amazing. She just came up to me today and she's like, is today Easter? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean it's today Easter? She's like, you're doing My Redeemer Lives. And I'm like, that's a great Easter song. But I also do My Redeemer Lives when John's playing because John goes nutsoid on it. And he gets to sing it too. So he's actually leading it. So it's fantastic. Oh, no, I'm sorry. And sorry, they practice it. Heather's going to be leading it. I think that's so John can kind of crazy rock out. But yeah, is Marge in tune to what's going on? Is she paying attention? Is she? Yeah, which means that's what we should all be doing. There's still more work to be done. Listen to what he says. Now, give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there and their cities were large and fortified, but the Lord helping me out, I will drive them out just as he said. Who are the Anakites again? Do you remember? Talked about it last week. Yeah, they're giants. They're descended from the Nephilim, which means they're about the size of Joshua Manning, maybe a little smaller. And of course, the most famous Anakite that we know is a guy by the name of Goliath. Now, this is what he says. I want to go after the big giants. Who here's inspired by that? Here's Caleb. I'm 85 years old. I want to fight the big boys. I love it. I'm telling you, some of the greatest ministry that ever happens in a church is from those who've been battling for a very long time. Because they also know the victory is theirs. God's already won. The promises have been fulfilled. Jesus Christ lived, died, and rose again. So all we're doing here now is preparing for heaven. And what do we do to prepare for heaven? Sit back and drink a pina colada? No. We get to the battle. We start fighting. Do you know some of the greatest powerful ministry comes from especially those who continue to pray? And some of the greatest prayer warriors that I know of are those who are older. Because you're there. You're like, I know that this works. I know that prayer is important. I love this. Send me out for the big boys. They're not, let the young bucks, battle the giants. Caleb's like, nope, put me in, coach. I'm ready to do this. And what does Joshua do? Joshua says, Caleb, you are old and advanced in years. Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as an inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba, after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Now, do you get what just happened there? So this particular place, Kiriath Arba, was named after the biggest, baddest giant that had ever lived. Bigger than Goliath, badder than Goliath, and Caleb says, I want him. You know why he wanted him? Because he knew that he was going to win. He knew that the victory was his. This is that promise that's, once again, we often fail to remember that. When Jesus says, I am with you, and as you, the church, move forward, the gates of hell will not stand against you. Now this is not the church putting walls around with giant moats and alligators so that when the devil attacks, we'll sustain the attack. No. You know what this is? This is us going into Satan's territory and saying, we're going to take it. This is us saying, we're going to battle the big guy himself. And Jesus says, oh, by the way, when you do that, he's going to fall. That's pretty huge, isn't it? The disciples did this. They're like, Jesus says, you know what? I'm going to send you out 2 by 2, and as you go out, you are going to cast out demons, you are going to heal people, you are going to raise people from the dead, and you are going to preach the kingdom of God. And so he says, I'm going to give you all that power and all that authority. That's yours. You go and do this. And so the disciples are like, well, okay, I guess there's work to be done. And I guess it's not just Jesus' job to do this. I guess we're part of it. So they went out and did that. They come back and they're like, Jesus, you won't believe it. It worked. It was crazy. We were healing people. We were casting out demons. People were rising from the dead, and we were preaching about you and your upcoming kingdom. And you know what Jesus said? He said, I saw Satan fall like lightning. Meaning, when I saw Satan fell, it was, you took him down. There's work to be done, people. And I think we need to be inspired by people like Caleb who say, it's not over yet. There is still more to be done. And dare I say now, more than ever, as we come out of COVID, I am in awe and I am grateful for all of you as a part of Searchlight. And here's the reason why. When I went into the coronavirus mode, I was praying, can we survive? But then I saw very quickly that it wasn't about survival, right? It wasn't about these people just settling in the land, hunkering down and hoping they can make it. It wasn't about surviving, it was about thriving. It was about growing. It was about advancing the kingdom. So we hit the gas. And because of Jesus Christ, because of God and all that he's doing, we kept going. We expanded the preschool. We actually had the preschool at its largest since the heyday from back in the day where there was over 200 kids here. I'm looking forward to the day we have 200 kids back on this campus. What do you think? Can we do it? I think so. I think it should be exciting. I'm looking forward to the day as things continue to move forward that we don't say, well, you know what? We've gotten we got a nice comfortable size, right? Like I look at the finances and I look at things and I go, you know, we could ride this for the next several decades without much work. We could just simply rest. No. There's still more to be done. There's still more people in Fullerton that have not known about Jesus. There are still people who have been struck through all of this coronavirus and are really in a panic because they have no idea what's going to happen to them after this life is over. And we get a chance to be a part of it. And no, I will not take the excuse that you are 85 years old, so you have already finished your job. There is still work to be done. And I don't care if you're 85 seconds old in the kingdom of God or 85 years old, there is still more to be done. So the question is, will you join in? It'll work. God has already promised it. You will have success. It'll work in the fact that as you continue to cast out and take over areas of your life personally and give them up to God, that he will give you victory over those. There's going to be things in your life that maybe you didn't dislodge this sin early on, but now God says, I'm going to do this for you. We continue to work. And if you think that you are going to obtain perfection here on earth, you are wrong, dead wrong. Billy Graham and Paul suffered their entire life battling sin, then guess what? So will you. There's more to be done. And I pray that as we continue to move forward, that we would be able to be inspired, that we would be Caleb, and we would say, all right, God, put us in. We're ready to fight. We're ready to battle. Not each other. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. It is against Satan himself. Who's ready? Let's pray.